Do you have 3 to 6 minutes of savings instead of 3 to 6 months of savings? If so, this video is for you. I'm going to give you 5 simple steps of how to build up a true emergency savings fund. And we're going to break it down in a way that makes this seem a lot more attainable and much more simple. For those of you who are new here, my name is Tessa Bella, aka Billion Dollar Bella, and my goal is to really help all the girlies make, manage, and multiply their money. So everything I talk about is how you can live your best soft girl life, but also get rich while doing it. And this is a little bit more of the foundational stuff, talking about an emergency savings fund, but I am well aware that there are more people that do not have something like this set up than not. So I wanted to make sure to talk about it. So I broke it down into 5 steps that I think make it really simple to give yourself a path towards having an emergency savings fund. Now, when I talk about an emergency savings fund, there is a piece of this equation that is really important, and that is determining what that actually looks like for you. Because some people are gonna feel totally fine and safe having, 3 months or less of emergency savings, whereas others are gonna want 6 to 12 months, and some people want way more than that in order to truly feel safe and secure. So before we dive into those 5 steps, I kind of want you to sit there for a second and think about what kind of person are you? What is gonna make you feel safe and secure? And without thinking about negative things, I want you to think about, when would I need this? What is that time frame that you would want to comfortably budget for to know that, okay, I can deal with whatever comes my way, hoping that nothing does, but in the event it did happen, we know that we're taken care of, we know we're safe, we know we're okay. What is that time frame for you? So that's kind of the first step here, is figuring out what that looks like. Once you've done that, we'll dive right into our 5 steps. Step number 1 is to calculate that exact number. What I find is a lot of people, when calculating their emergency savings, they're only factoring in the bare minimum essentials. So of course they think about their housing expense, they think about maybe a car payment, and maybe 1 or 2 other things, but they fail to include some of the other pieces of the equation that will help them live a somewhat similar life. Now, of course, if you really are going through a challenging time where you need to tap into these savings, I'm sure you could probably do without Netflix or getting your nails done for a couple weeks or a couple months if you needed to, in order to make sure that you got yourself back on track. But I find that it's most helpful to calculate the number that you want in this emergency savings that would allow you to live somewhat of the same lifestyle that you're currently living. Because if you under budget, then you're going to run through that money much faster than you thought you would, and you'll end up right back in the same position of not having a safety buffer. Step number 2 is you want to determine the timeline for which you want to have this saved. Was it one of your goals for the year to have an emergency savings fund? So maybe you have 12 months to save this up. Is it something you want to get in place much sooner, or just gradually chip away at over the next little bit? So determine what time frame you want to work with. Now, of course, the shorter time frame means you're going to have a much more aggressive savings goal. The longer the time frame means that you could tuck away a couple $100 here and there, and it would compound into that total savings. The way that I do it is I have a minimum threshold number that I know I want to keep in my emergency savings. I still continue to tuck away money into savings beyond that number, but that is the threshold of money that I just sort of never touch, and it's truly set aside for an emergency when and if that were to ever happen. Which brings us right into step number 3. So in order to make it easier for us to actually set aside that additional money, we want to make sure that we cut out some expenses. So what I want you to do is take a look at your expenses, and you're going to create 2 separate lists. List number 1 is going to be things that you could cancel or pause for the short term. Whatever it is, we're going to look at our expenses and see if there's anything unnecessary or just that's a bit more of a splurge that maybe we could cut back on or eliminate or pause for 6 months in order to give ourselves a little bit more wiggle room with those savings that we're trying to tuck away. List number 2 that you want to create is, can I look for a cheaper alternative here? Now, this is really important. I want you guys to remember this phrase that I absolutely live by, which is shavings make a pile. Now, that quote is something that I think is really helpful when it comes to trying to reach your financial goals, because a lot of times we only focus on the big numbers. We only focus on the things that we really think are going to make a drastic change really quickly, but you fail to look at the small things that compound over time. It may not seem like much that you've got a subscription for $9 here and $27 here and $19 here and $12 there, But before you know it, those subscriptions can add up substantially, and you could be spending a lot more money than you realize every single month. But because it's not these large sums, you may not even notice that it's happening or that it's as big of an issue as it really is. So when you make these two separate lists, not only are you going to find things that you could probably do away with altogether, you'll find some that you could pause, and then you'll find some that you could definitely look for a cheaper alternative. Now, it does take a little bit of time to search for those alternatives, but I find that in the long run, it is really, really worth it to look for those better alternatives that are more cost effective, especially in a time when you're trying to set aside some additional savings or be a little bit smarter with your financial situation. Step number 4 is that we want to increase your income in order to bridge that gap so that now you do have some additional income that you can set aside into that savings. Now, this may sound obvious and you may roll your eyes thinking, well, yeah, if it was that easy, I would have increased my income a while ago. But this is typically going to tie back to how much time you do or do not have. For example, there are some ways that, oh yeah, I do work a full-time job, but I know I've got time before that job, after that job, on the weekends, that I could probably work towards setting up an online business, picking up a couple extra side gigs, doing a side hustle, picking up some extra shifts, whatever it may be. Or there are some people who are already working multiple jobs or caring for a family or doing a bunch of other stuff in school. There's countless other obligations that you probably have. So you may look at your day and think, now I really don't have any extra time to commit to additional income. Regardless of the situation, my suggestion is to pursue an online income stream. Now, it doesn't ever have to be your main thing if you don't want it to. It doesn't have to replace what you're currently doing. But I find that having an online income stream provides you this whole new sense of security, of freedom, and it's the one thing that you don't have to trade your time for money. And so you really have the opportunity to not only earn additional income, but scale it up as well. I actually just filmed an online income masterclass where I teach you guys my exact strategy of how I'm building my online income up to $60,000 a month in the next 90 days. It is a super simple process. I say simple, not easy. It is simple, but you do need to follow the formula. So if you want to take a look at that, check the link down in the description. It explains exactly how to do it, how you can implement it and see those results as well. So I would highly encourage you to explore that option. If that's not a direction you want to go, at the very least, explore some opportunities within your current role, job, or career to see if you can increase your income either with a bonus structure, additional hours, or some sort of pay raise or additional compensation. Step number 5, you want to set up a high yield savings account. Now, a high yield savings account is going to give you an additional or higher APY, annual percentage yield, on the money that is sitting in that account. So these kind of accounts are particularly great for something like a long-term savings where you don't anticipate touching that money very often. Now, when doing your research for a high yield savings account, in many cases, they may be available through your traditional banks, credit unions, credit cards, all that kind of stuff. I personally love the Ally Bank high yield savings account opportunity. It's not something I'm sponsored with. It's just my personal favorite. I love that you can kind of separate your funds into buckets and they don't have an early withdrawal penalty, whereas some high yield savings accounts will penalize you if you're pulling your money out before, certain thresholds, etc. So definitely make sure that you're doing your research. Those percentages will fluctuate, but you can typically find one 4 to 5% or more. Once you found that high yield savings account, I would recommend that that's where you're going to put at least 3 months of those savings. Now, some people that I've worked with prefer to do 3 months in that high yield savings that they know they're not going to touch anytime soon, and then an additional 3 months in their savings account that they typically bank with, so that they do have a little bit easier access to it in the event that they needed it. But it's up to you and your situation to determine what's going to make the most sense for you. One other reason that I love having a high yield savings account, especially separate from my traditional banking, is that it allows me to not really think about that money. I know it kind of sounds silly, But when I find that things are not so easily accessible or visible to me, it tends to just sit over there, continue to compound, and I don't count that towards money that I'm able to go and touch. And so I truly treat it like an emergency savings fund. So for me, that's always just been really helpful, but of course, find what works for you. The one thing I will highly recommend though is that you don't just keep that savings in just a traditional savings account that you're not earning that higher percentage on. So do yourself a favor and check out a high yield savings account. I can guarantee you that it is going to be a better choice for saving that 3 to 6 months of emergency funds. Now, hopefully these 5 steps were simple, straightforward, and attainable for you to really lay out a roadmap of what your savings goals are going to look like over the next couple of months. If you guys have any questions at all, please drop them in the comments below, and be sure to explore all of the resources that I've included in the description to help you become that best rich girl in your life. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for being here, and don't forget to subscribe.